Thank you.
All right, welcome. All right, it's great to have you back. Hey, thanks for being here. All right, Ina.
Whoa, do I see it?
Yep,
Yeah, all right,
perfect.
okay.
All right, so I want to start with just sort of a big picture question for each of you. What has changed from your perspective in the past year when it comes to media, information, and truth? I don't know, Jevin, do you want to jump in and get this kicked off?
I mean, well, I think one, the election, of course, intensified that. It really, when we announced this class, it filled within a minute, and I talked to the students that took the class afterwards, and I think the election certainly was in the back of their mind. But one of the things we talk about, this has been around a long time. This has been, yellow journalism and all the sorts of worries that came when the printing press came, and then these technological developments always scare people into thinking that it's going to lead to more misinformation. But I do think that this year, I think we're finding some things about foreign intervention that sort of intensifies it, and also just the platforms and some of the issues around something we call tribal epistemology, where people are sort of sharing information, not so much because they even know that it's true or care that it's true, but they're just sort of a commitment to their tribe. And I think some of the platforms sort of facilitate that kind of knowledge.
Yeah, I think people in the tech industry look at virality and things going viral as a good thing, but it seems like almost over the past year, it's gone back to almost the medical nature of virality, where a virus is not something you want to have. Yeah, did you want to go ahead and jump in?
So Jevin made a good point that this is not new. This fake news or misinformation is not something that's new. What is different is the technology that is available to us and how connected we are to each other. So you have the increase in reach potential that you have for a given piece of content. They can access more people. And then you also have the access to a scalable revenue for this misinformation. So if I produce a piece of content that is misleading, but it is viral, I have access to revenue and reach, and those are the two factors of the attention economy that will keep kind of propelling this phenomenon forward unless we do something about it.
Yeah. Ina, from a journalist perspective, what is your outlook on this whole issue?
I mean, I think it's really concerning for the points that Vinny's raising. I think the issue right now is that we're using technology, and technology is enabling the spread of fake news and a business model around misinformation, disinformation, and bad information that doesn't exist for good information. And the business models for journalism are challenged and challenging, and yet the business for things that are not journalism or things that are misleading is actually solid and well established. That's a problem. We're not using our technology well if that's the case. So I think right now technology is creating a problem, and we have yet to have the technology that's solving it. Vinny's got a small team that does an amazing job to let people know. Certainly journalistic and news organizations do a tremendous service in trying to say, hey, this isn't factually true. But right now we're a few humans trying to compete against a very powerful enemy in fake news.
In your work, have you seen more questions being raised about your pieces or other people's pieces? Are people are the intelligent readers out there being more skeptical because of the awareness that's being brought to fake news?
I think it's mixed. I think it's too simple to say yes or no. I think there's a greater appreciation in some senses for the work of journalists broadly. At the same time, we are sort of teaching people, hey, we want you to be more critical, and that includes of us, and I think we should, as journalists, we should want people to really question it, and it is imperative. One of the real founding hallmarks of Axios is this idea that we need to be impartial carriers of the news, and that's very hard, and it means I have to bite my tongue on Twitter a lot more than I'd like,
really?
At least about news. I can harass Mike Isaac all I want, but I can't take the kinds of political stands that I might have been able to at other jobs, because we want that credibility. We want to be known for delivering information that you can trust regardless of where on the political aisle you come from.
That's interesting, because there are other schools of thought that would say, hey, the more transparent you are, the more authentic you are, the more you can actually get across to readers that you're being true to yourself and to the facts.
I mean, I think it needs to be both. I mean, clearly there are things about myself and where I come from that I want to be very upfront with readers about, and have always been, and I've been kind of an open book on Twitter for my entire professional career, at least since Twitter's been around. And I think that is really important. I think where it's also important is to not, people need to be able to trust where they're getting the news. It's really complicated. It's a discussion we have internally all the time, and I think all journalism organizations are doing, and it's become much tougher. Things that we didn't think of as partisan issues are suddenly partisan issues, and it makes it hard. And when you have people in positions of power that are speaking untruths, how do you call those without seeming partisan? Like, this is just factually untrue, and I think it's a challenging environment.
Yeah, and I would just add something else about what's different now. I think the consequences are you could argue, are a little larger too when you've got foreign leaders, and I'm not just talking about the United States, foreign leaders basing their own tweets and their own decisions based on things that are not factual. I mean, the famous one was the defense minister from Pakistan responding to a fake news item and in a sort of a sword-rattling way. And I think there's also this other issue. It's not so much the readers. I wouldn't be as concerned as the readers that read like Ina's work. It's those 200 million people coming on around the world for the first time and having their phone and having access to a world that they haven't been exposed to yet. I mean, a lot of Pizzagate, people that have looked into this, looking at the gentleman Edgar from North Carolina that charged up to Washington, D.C., he was just getting exposed. At least that's the understanding of some of the investigative journalists. So it's a lot of the world coming online, and their first exposure, it's not a great time to get online.
Take us inside your class. What do the students come in assuming and doing, and what do they leave having changed?
Yeah, so I mean, well, they love to call bullshit. I found out that students love to do that. I was even thinking having flags so they could sort of not just have to call it out every second. But we want them to have that enthusiasm for thinking critically. The one cool thing about the class, when we registered it, it's a 160-seat class. And it registered, within a minute, and from 40 different majors across campus. And they were from seniors. Those seniors don't even get credit for this class because it's a 100 elective. And so to see that sort of passion, and I thought at first it was just the sort of, provocativeness of the title, but their students are recognizing what's going on here, and I think they're really enthusiastic about it. And probably the coolest thing that I have found is outside my classroom on the University of Washington campus, we now, just within 6 months, have more than 60 universities across the university now adopting the content or versions of the course. So we really see a spread. So virality in a bad way can spread, but also virality in a good way.
That's interesting. All right, Vinny, take us inside the problem. You are on the front lines of this issue. First off, for the 3 people in the room who don't know what Snopes is, tell us what you do.
I want to start off by saying that many will know about us for very bad reasons, is that our rise in popularity since the early 90s has grown commensurate with the amount of misinformation that's being spread. And we're one of the few teams that has been combating fake news since the early 90s. We really, Snopes was a destination for individuals to find out about urban legends and misinformation even before the technology giants that are now kind of complicit in the dissemination of misinformation even existed. And we're a small team. We are, top to bottom, there's only 16 members of the Snopes staff, and we reach an audience of about 20 million people a month. And they're very engaged. They want to call out misinformation. They want to see it debunked, and they report that misinformation directly to us. And we work to try to identify the most pervasive and the most problematic topics that are making their way through our digital media, and identify those and fact check those pieces of content. And we work on that around the clock. And we really don't see any particular candidate or anything kind of contributing to this other than the increase of communication that we have. Because the more communication that we have, the more potential there is for misinformation. And now we have the weaponization of misinformation that is extremely problematic. You have our foreign adversaries and other foreign adversaries looking to take advantage of the discourse that we're having and to sow discontent and a lack of trust. But then you also have the commodification of information, which is so very new. The access to scalable revenue means that profiteers, I kind of put them in two camps. You have the propagandists and you have the profitgandists. And they, and sometimes they're doing both. And now, so we're trying to fight a war in the digital theater on two fronts. We're having to deal with the noise that is productized misinformation, those who have found out that clicks convert into cash and fake news converts at the best. And you have purveyors of misinformation for whether it's corporate interests or it's political parties' interests or a foreign adversary, finding out that they can produce content, that they can promote that content and buy media against it in order to disseminate those messages. And that's something that's very new, and it's something that is really beyond what any one team can do. And we're really, we're trying to do our best to fact check at an individual level, meaning find a piece of problematic content and fact check that piece of content. But we also have to deal with the fundamental issues of misinformation, which is the dissemination of that content. And technology platforms and discovery platforms, be it Facebook or search with Google, are complicit in the spread of misinformation, and we have to work together to try to reduce the amount of misinformation that's in the space in order to create a safer digital public square, which is a new phenomenon for humans. We've had the traditional public square, and now we are in this digital realm where we're all very connected, and we have to work together to mitigate the risks associated with that.
Very basic here, but how do you, in this world where any piece of information could be completely bogus, determine what's real and what's not? And in what way can the people in the audience use that kind of method to fact check for themselves?
So if you look at a fact check on Snopes, we break it down into three distinct parts, and that is the claim, the rating, and the origin. Now, the claim is that, quite simply, is what is that piece of misinformation? What is misleading? And of course, we affix a rating, whether it be true, false, mixture, mostly false. We have a rating scale that you can find on the site. But really, the next piece of that is the origin. And I really encourage people to really try to find the origin of that claim. And that's what our team does. If you find a meme on the internet that kind of implicates a political figure or seems the claim is very specious that you find on social media, find where it came from. Find out if it was made up out of whole cloth from a known purveyor of misinformation, or that they have a certain political ideology. And if you trace that origin, you can have a healthy skepticism about the information that you're encountering, as opposed to an unhealthy skepticism where you think across the board nothing is real, everything is fake. So it's really about the origin of that claim. Find out where it came from and why all of a sudden it has that power to evoke emotion from you.
Yeah. Jevin, what do you get across to your students? What do you hope they leave with that they didn't have when you came in? And like, in this way that they're walking out with?
So if nothing else, it's dig to the source. I think that's one of the big things. The other thing I think is one of the most important principles in bullshit studies, and that is Brandolini's asymmetry principle. And that is, it's easy to create information, but it's hard to clean up. It's actually, in the way it was stated, is it's an order of magnitude easier to create BS than it is to clean it up. And so the problem is, once things get out, like Pizzagate, even after you've cleaned it up, people are still protesting on the White House lawns. Even after you clean up bogus information around vaccinations, it still sticks around. Even after the medical community, you invest millions and actually hundreds of millions of dollars trying to debunk that claim. So if we can get them to start just this habit of mind, that's sort of what we talk about, create a habit of mind. And it's not just being a skeptical jerk all the time, too. It's being careful about how you do that, and also just making sure that when they see a piece of information, they're sort of digging to it. And for us, we have a real emphasis on data reasoning. So there's always data. Actually, I find that students are pretty good at calling old school BS. That's sort of our typical language from the car salesman, from marketers. Sorry, many marketers in the room. But they're good at calling BS on that. But what they're less good at is calling BS that's dressed in statistics and computer science language and the things they see there. So we try to unveil that a little bit. But the main thing is just simply dig to the source and create a habit of mind of being skeptical.
How much can we blame Facebook and Google for this?
I think they're certainly not the underlying only cause, but they're definitely one of the largest factors in the transmission and the speed with which this gets out. I think there's a couple problems. I think there aren't enough people applying the kind of skepticism that both Jevin and Vinny are talking about, that you may have a packed classroom of eager kids, but there's too many adults and people that should know better that just aren't choosing to apply that level of scrutiny. But then you do have two problems of the internet, and particularly of these large platforms, Facebook and whatever. One is we have self-selected these echo chambers. So we find our friends, we tend to gravitate towards people who we agree with, who tend to post things. So there's that self-selection. And then there's also this issue of what I call a false binary that the purveyors of this, the platforms have provided, that either they're in the business of banning content or they have to let everything have an equal footing. And I actually don't think that that needs to be the case. I think we're letting them off the hook if we accept that. The fact is, Facebook and Twitter and Google, they use algorithms to decide what to show. And there's no reason that those algorithms can't get smarter and start lending more weight towards known credible sources and start being, the algorithms need to be skeptical.
Yeah.
The algorithms need to learn what BS looks like. Right. We're not going to win if you have to teach every person and you have to debunk every fact. It's just, there's no way you can teach enough students, and there's no way Snopes is going to be able to hire enough people. The algorithms that propagate these have to get better, and I think we're going to see pressure. We were having this discussion backstage of either it's going to come from the industry recognizing it has a problem and dealing with it, or I think regulators are going to get involved, and we've already seen an increased appetite in the wake of what happened with the last elections, and so I think there will be pressure to either self-regulate or face regulation.
Wow, okay,
Yeah.
so, yeah, go ahead, Vinny.
And I think that there's, back to these algorithms, and the reality is, and I don't want to speak, amateurishly about algorithms, but the reality is, the businesses like Facebook and like Google have already taken to liberty to curate content for you. And what I'm saying is, from trying to tackle misinformation at a fundamental standpoint, is there has to be a redistribution. Now, I know that's a really dirty word, redistribution. When you talk about wealth, that's like a really dirty word. But redistribution of revenue and reach to credible and original content. And that's something that needs to be baked into the mindset of those that are trying to build these systems and build these products, which are good. When I talk to members of the tech community and members of these social platforms, because, to be quite frank, to be honest, Snopes is a third-party fact checker for Facebook. We are one of 6. We are an independent third party that fact checks content that they identify as misinformation on their platform. So what we need to do is we need to convey to them that it's not that your product is bad, it's that your product is so good that the externalities that your industry is introducing into the marketplace need to be addressed. We talk about climate change, and that's something that we, absolutely need to focus our attention on. And we look at the fossil fuel industry as, we love where you have gotten us and where you continue to take us, but the pollution is killing our environment. Now, when we talk about technology and we talk about the dissemination of information, misinformation is that pollution in the ecosystem. And we have to have businesses have to take the responsibility to rein in those externalities and create a space that is safer for consumers and constituents online.
What role has Donald Trump played in this, from your perspective?
Man, I try to divest the candidate from the phenomena. It's very hard to do that. But the reality is, we have a situation where credibility is the same thing as reach, and the same thing as engagement, is the same thing as following, as virility. We've exchanged those things. So in order to be credible, you need to reach a lot of people. You need to have tons of followers on Instagram and Twitter, and then all of a sudden, you exchange that reach and that engagement for credibility. And what you have is an individual who's amassed a huge following in the private sector, as an entertainer, as a celebrity. I don't think that he would deny that. Also as a businessman, I suppose. And I mean, I don't know. I don't have any bankrupt companies. And then you give him this platform, and then he is permitted to speak freely, as we all are, and what he says is taken as truth. Now, we've had to debunk a lot of information that has come from the president, but we've also had to debunk a lot of information about him as well. So not only is he capitalizing on this highly polarized environment, but there are profiteers out there on both sides of the political spectrum that are saying, here is my opportunity to make a boatload of cash and influence, our discourse in a way that I see fit, that has not manifested itself yet in time. I think every election we have to deal, in the US specifically, we have to deal with 4 years of technological advancement in a generation where we're making leaps and bounds. So we would be dealing with this crisis, we're gonna deal with this crisis every 4 years, regardless of the candidates. But I think you look at the last election, you have two of what would be considered the most polarizing political figures running at the same time, and that's just gonna bring the intensity of this problem way higher. I don't wanna give them credit for misinformation. Humans, we've been doing that since we've been painting in caves. We've been deceiving each other. But it certainly has definitely contributed to the magnitude of the problem, for sure.
We talked about this a little bit earlier, but it's interesting because if you could have the business models gravitate towards the truth, where companies were rewarded, media companies were rewarded for actually conveying the truth, that would be ideal. But Snopes is actually an example of that. You are not a nonprofit, correct?
We are not. We are looking in other avenues as a way to incorporate that better serves our mission. But we are an anomaly in digital media. We are a profitable, independent, closely held news business, and we've done that because we've been able to do that because we've sought out from Jump Street to be a credible, reliable source of information, and that has carried us through all the way into 2017 and will continue to carry us further. So what I say is people that are entering this space, don't be distracted by the profit incentives as best you can. Do not waver in the things that are so crucial to your existence in this space, and make the sacrifices in your profit margins and but not in your content. You have to keep focused on producing credible and original content, and make it your mission to get platforms and brands and advertisers who are the key pillars in this attention economy to recognize that. And that's what we're working on diligently from one of the top debunkers in the space, is to say, the problem that we're facing is not because we don't have credible content out there. We have a problem that content is undervalued in the marketplace, and our best efforts are spent trying to manifest that value again.
There's a project, we've covered this on GeekWire, from the University of Washington, where they use different speeches from President Obama, and we're essentially extremely disturbing, where you're essentially able to place different words in his mouth and from different speeches, and it's very hard to tell the difference between the real speech and the fake video of the speech of him saying something else. Is this going to get worse or better as technology advances?
It's definitely going to get worse.
Yeah,
I talked to Adobe. They basically are, close to being able to build Photoshop for voice, and you'll be able to make anyone say anything. And the problem is, and it's already a problem with photos. It is already the case that somebody can do a credible enough Photoshop job that we can't tell it, and that is coming to video and voice. And the problem is, if we can't handle finding truth in printed text, we're going to have an even tougher time when somebody's made us believe it. We don't have enough of the critical people in your classroom. We don't have enough of the people that are even going to Snopes to check out the factual nature of the statements. I don't think it's a new problem. I mean, historically, again, this is an old problem, and these are just new manifestations of it. But certainly, I think we are going to be faced with this real challenge of, one of the ways of verifying something is to say, well, did he actually say it? Well, let's go look. Is there video of him saying it? That may no longer be as effective of a fact-checking method. That's two problems. One is a technology problem, and I think there will be solutions to that. The other is a credible, skeptical public that I don't think is as easily solved.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, so some of those colleagues of mine, I've talked to them either on the tennis court or over lunch, and I give them a hard time because I think they're a little overconfident in their ability to correct for those mechanisms. I think us in tech, so I teach my faculty position is in a technology kind of department, and we have this overconfidence that we can sort of fix these. I think this is an example that really it keeps me up at night, and I think for technology, the technology world, I sort of encourage them to think far ahead of these photoshopping of voices because it completely is coming. And some things are just out of our control. To give you an example, if I was to search on the web, if we were talking over lunch and I said, you know what, vaccinations cause shaken baby syndrome, and you were to put that into a Google search or a Bing search, you would have websites that actually say that this is true, because you can create this, but the antidote to that information comes way after. The medical community, again, can't keep up with all the fake news that's creating. So if now you're creating voice sort of authenticity, then we've got some big challenges ahead.
So one point that Jevin brought up, and that was brought up before, is the gap between when misinformation enters the ecosystem and when it can be addressed. And that amount of time, the greater that amount of time is, the more irrelevant that fact check is, or that debunking is. So what we need to do is we need to figure out a way to reduce the amount of time that information in this digital space gets contextualized. So what happens is we're inundated with messaging. You got tweets and posts and notifications and radio shows, and everything is kind of bombarding you with information, all without context. Headline after headline after headline. What is the context for that piece of information in your life? And if you were to get a piece of information in front of you that was a article related to vaccine, and I was able to immediately and instantaneously inform that reader, did you know that the byline is admin? Did you know that the website has only existed for 3 months? Did you know that it's overridden with ads and it's paginated, there's 10 pages to it, strictly to derive revenue from you as a consumer? If we can build technology and automation that allows for that contextualization of information as close to real time as possible, then I think what you'll have is people having the necessary context to make better decisions about the media that they consume. But that time in between is so essential to focus on, because unless it's instantaneous, think about a live debate. Once that information is spoken, and if it is false information, then unless that moderator is able to immediately combat it with definitive information to the contrary, which often they're precluded from doing as a part of the kind of the rules of moderating those events, that information is out there and it is going to travel, it's going to get picked up by the blogosphere, it's going to be twisted by purveyors of misinformation, and then what is a Snopes fact check going to do 3 days later when we finally are able to put the men and women on that task?
You can't unring the bell.
You can't unring the bell.
Yeah.
I think it's both the speed and the degree to which things are corrected and the speed at which they're disseminated. I think the platform players really have a role in. Right now, it's very easy for that bad information to spread as fast, or as you point out, faster than maybe even credible information on the same topic. So I think limiting the spread of it, and I do think there are technological things. Another example is if you tweet out misinformation. Say I find something wrong, I say, Todd kills puppies, and then I found out actually Todd doesn't kill puppies. It was, a different Todd. If I tweet Todd kills puppies, what are my ways of correcting that? I can delete the tweet, in which case nobody new will see it, but everyone else who's seen it will have seen it. I can respond to it, but my reply to that, oh wait, I was wrong, Todd doesn't kill puppies, gets seen by a fraction of the people. And now all people are thinking about is Todd kills puppies. Plus, I've now said it like 6 times. Somebody's tweeting, but that's another story.
This is the age-old problem of the A1 newspaper story corrected on B13.
It is, but there was a pretty easy solution. It isn't always employed, but the right thing to do is correct with the same with the same prominence as you did the original story is the right journalistic thing
Right.
to do, especially if the mistake is severe enough. But I think there isn't even the mechanism in a lot of these platforms to do it. If I share a link on Facebook, yeah, you can add to the comments, but it's really hard. It's really hard, and it shouldn't be hard. It's not
Yeah,
that hard.
and that's the one thing I want people to think about too, is how do you tell a credible and a trustworthy publication from a misinformation site? And it's that one piece, the commitment to open and honest corrections. And that is what separates credible journalism from non-credible reporting. That's what separates credible outlets from non-credible outlets, is humans are running newsrooms, reporters are people, and people make mistakes. But it's that commitment to open and honest corrections that we take very seriously at Snopes, and many other news organizations take very seriously, is what separates and defines credible reporting from non-credible reporting. And we need to figure out a way to take those signals of credible reporting, be it a commitment, a policy out there for open and honest corrections, and take that and embody that in society and in our technology platforms. And that way we can surface credible publications. Because fact checks don't convince people who don't agree with you. You give them a Snopes fact check and you say, hey, this is false. It's not, they're gonna go, yeah, but Snopes is fake news, or Snopes is, a partisan website or something like that. But if your friend tells you, I read that and I have some information that's different, that sticks. So we have to figure out a way to get more people to kind of like herd immunity, in a sense. We get more things that like Jevin's doing and news organizations are doing, is get more people informed and engaged, and that way, you can be confronted as soon as you start disseminating that information that, that's not a credible source, and this is why.
I'm hearing a startup idea here. And here's the startup that I would do.
Hey, listen, we got some, those are ours. No, I'm just kidding.
You've got the Twitter verified badge. You've got the Facebook verified badge. Why not? And this gets into real issues, because then you start talking about pre-publication control, but why not have a third-party entity like Snopes do a pre-publication review and verify things with a badge?
So we're a member of the Poynter Institute has a fact-checking code of ethics, and in
Right.
order to be a third-party fact-checker on Facebook's platform, you have to abide by those code of ethics, which includes a commitment to open and honest corrections. It also includes a commitment to a transparent organization structure and transparent funding. These are not impossibilities to bake into the news feed. If you're giving out that verification badge, if you're extending your platform's credibility to a specific user or brand or person, that should not be just because you have 1 million followers.
And I don't think it needs to be, to your point, I don't think it needs to be pre-publication review. I think you can use reputation. I mean, how do we decide who we're going to buy from on eBay? You're not going to do someone who's never been on eBay before
Right.
and has no reviews. Same thing, I'm really strict. If I'm going to go to an Airbnb, I won't go to a place that doesn't have reviews. Similarly with news, there's no reason we can't have reputation, both scores that you or I could look at, but also that the algorithm takes into account. If somebody's never reported news before, if an outlet has never reported news, chances are they're not in the news business.
But it's not always that black and white. I mean, usually they've been putting out fake news for a while.
Right, but I mean, you can have a reputation.
Is that not true?
There's one of the biggest problems that we have to recognize is the issue of temporality. These people who are purveying misinformation are scam artists. They are trying to dupe consumers. They are trying to take advantage of people's ignorance or lack of understanding of particular issues in order to gaslight them, in order to get them to evoke a certain emotion, or to click 10 pages so they can get ads. But they pop up and they go away. Yeah. They pop up and they go away. They come in new forms. They come with new domains. They use tactics like domain spoofing. They do all of these things because their focus is not content. Their focus is gamification. So, that temporality issue is like, yes, a website can pop up out of nowhere. It's stripped of its credibility signals as it's posted on a platform, and you view it in the browser coming from a source that you think is trustworthy. My mom and dad are on my Facebook feed. If my uncle shares an article and I click on it and it's in the platform, there's no credibility signals that are extended to me.
That's my point. It doesn't look any different. So on
Right.
Facebook, complete BS and a New York Times article look the same until at least until you click on it, if not longer.
And form factor is an issue, and that's
Yeah.
a new thing. It's like you have time, you have a paper, you have limitations in that, and now what website looks any different from another website on a 320 pixel width phone? You know, fundamentally, how does Axios look different from Snopes.com on a device the size of my hand? And how do you tell the difference between a credible publication and a non-credible publication when it's so easy to represent yourself online with a WordPress site and GoDaddy hosting, and you know what I mean, and so on and so forth.
And we're actually we're seeing a microcosm of this in science. Of all places, you would think that that wouldn't have been pierced by this fake news epidemic. But it's really truly an epidemic. I've been going to meetups. This is a science crisis right now, where just like in the regular world, people are creating journals by putting up a WordPress site and saying, I'm the journal of Todd's dog killing organization. And if you hate dogs, then you should write a research article. And then what's happening is that journalists, and they're not all at fault because they're humans and they make mistakes, they'll then cite it because it looks very sciencey.
Looks
and
credible.
So there's a lot of money in this area, especially because the business model in science is to go more open, and because of that, it's changed the way that we fund the way this is published. So I would say, to your sort of challenge to sort of come up with a startup, I think there's tons of opportunity from sort of my world, academia. I sort of look to technology and I say there are so many ways in which money can be made and solutions can be
Get in the business
solved.
of media literacy, get in the business of quality assurance in terms of the information and advertising industry, get in the business of dispelling misinformation. You will have a job for at least as long as the people who have worked at Snopes have had a job, and we've been around for over 20 years now.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. I could talk about this for hours. Go
One
ahead.
quick correction.
Last
As a
takeaway.
journalist, I just do want to state the record. I have no evidence that Todd kills puppies. I have no evidence he doesn't, but
I love that that's the final takeaway from the GeekWire Summit. Okay. Well, Vinny Green, Jevin West, and Ina Fried, thank you very much. Great discussion.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Awesome. Thanks, Ina.